Historically speaking, Eurocentric historians, particularly of the 18th and 19th centuries, have painted a warped view of many outside cultures and peoples, the other. Those of the indigenous African and American civilizations, particularly pre-conquest American, have been especially victimized historically, artistically, cinematically. As a tool of propaganda, cinema has been complicit in a systematic degradation of indigenous people. From distorting the history of ancient Africa to twisting the characteristics of the Native American and the discovery of their world, Western society's view of indigenous cultures has become so perverted that to this day, the vast majority of society is either unaware or turns a blind eye to the rich and diverse histories of these people. With the birth of cinema, films that featured African characters or culture were often generally negative or wholly stereotypical. During the colonial era, Africa was represented exclusively by Western filmmakers. The continent was portrayed as an exotic land without its own history or culture. A popular example of this kind of cinema included the jungle epic Tarzan, created by Edgar Rice Burroughs, where the African characters and ape characters are treated as interchangeable. In fact, the way in which several scenes are filmed in the 1918 original motion picture imply that Africans are game to be hunted. In the original motion picture, Tarzan introduces himself as the, quote, killer of beasts and many black men. Even in the 2016 update, the plot involves Tarzan returning to Africa to basically defiantly prove that only white men are capable of leading the pack when it comes to humane requirements. In this version, Africa is basically reduced as a port of resources that needs protection from greedy white businessmen, that none of these people can do anything about. Mogambo is a 1953 film set in Africa, with the central cast members being whites visiting Africa exclusively for the purpose of big game hunting and science purposes. The African characters in the film serve roles such as guides, and are mainly kept physically separate from our white protagonists. In the French colonies, Africans were legally prohibited from making films of their own. The ban stunted the growth of film as a means for Africans to express themselves politically, culturally, and artistically. In 1955, however, Pauline Soumanu Vieira explored what it was like being an African under French colonial rule with his film Afrique sur Scène, which is considered to be the first film to be directed by a native African. Other early examples of atypical films surrounding Africa and African colonization include Les Statuts Mérite aussi. This film, directed by Chris Marker and Alain Resnais, focuses on the theft of African art by European colonists. Not surprisingly, this film was banned by the French government for about a decade. Also doing his part in trying to demystify these perversions, the French filmmaker Jean Rouch. Rouch made documentaries that were not explicitly anti-colonial, but challenged perceptions about colonial Africa and gave a new voice to Africans through film. He was the first person to work with Africans who would have important careers in African cinema in the future. Because most of the films prior to independence were egregiously racist in nature, African filmmakers of the independence era saw filmmaking as an important political tool for rectifying the erroneous image of Africans put forward by Western filmmakers, and for reclaiming the image of Africa for Africans. Through Western writings and filmmaking, the Columbus story has become the most crucial to history. It has also become the most crucial to Eurocentrism. For many North American children, Columbus is an icon, representing discovery, adventure, the New World itself. An important quote from the reading that is worth sharing. Cinematic recreations of the past reshape the imagination of the present, legitimizing false memories and assumptions. In the 1949 film titled Christopher Columbus, the character is portrayed as a man of vision, an avatar of modernity. He is lauded for his heroic efforts to reach the New World despite his many obstacles. The natives are constantly referred to as heathens throughout the picture, in desperate need of religious conversion. When natives interact with Columbus for the first time in the film, they spontaneously applaud his arrival and seemingly take joy in their own enslavement. They also quickly abandoned their own beliefs and culture and embraced the culture of Europe as irresistibly true. In reality, Columbus was mainly driven by greed and profit and slaughtered countless natives. Many modern historians hold him responsible for genocide. Do we see one bit of that in this Western idealization of him? Of course not. Embrace of the Serpent is a 2015 internationally co-produced film that tells the story of Karamakati, an Amazonian shaman and last survivor of his tribe. Although he is reluctant to become involved with a Westerner, he helps two white men, the first a German in 1909, the second an American over 30 years later in 1940, in their search for the rare yacruna, a sacred plant. An important thing to mention is that in the 1940 journey, Karamakati seems to have forgotten the customs of his own people, and refers to an old photograph of himself as his chalachaki, a native term for a hollow spirit. As time passed, Karamakati now believes that he has lost his true self, and has become his chalachaki. Unable to remember many of his tribe's basic rituals, the shaman feels like a shell of his former self, lacking the important knowledge, dreams, and connection to nature that once animated him. He notes that the rocks, mountains, and nature used to speak to him, but now he has lost his hearing. He hears nothing. The line is broken, he says. The memories are gone. Rocks, trees, animals, they all went silent.